Hey guys, this is James from TeaDB, bringing you InBetweenIsode number 33. So as you can see, the tea tray is out and we are doing another comparison. So today, if some of you guys have seen the previous episodes, I did a comparison, a couple InBetweenIsodes back on the Hong Kong style. And really in that episode, it was the second time out of 3 times that we had brought that tea onto the show, and really the point was to compare kind of how these really cheap Daiso tins that you can pick up for about $1.50 at the Japanese dollar store, effectively Daiso, do with sort of that mature Pu-erh. And so I think that's more of like a consensus feel, is that like these things will do well if you just break up the cake of like your mature Pu-erh or even your ripe Pu-erh, things that have been a little bit wet stored. But what I did, which is can be expected for a lot of the tea heads, is just overdo things. So I didn't buy just a few of these for all my mature Pu-erhs. I ended up buying like about 14 or 15 of them, which is just frankly way too many considering the amount of samples that I have. And so I ended up using these for, one of the other advantages is it's just a quick and easy access to grab this and pull it out, rather than having to chip away at a cake each time you want to drink it. So that's another advantage. So I started to do it for young Pu-erh, and then at a certain point I was like, wait a second, we should probably think about this a little bit more, maybe do a couple experiments just to see how this works. And so I haven't done this experiment yet, but my hypothesis is basically that it could be beneficial for the aromas, just because it helps to really contain these. Normally my cakes will sit in the Pu-erh, which is for me just a mini fridge, and the aroma tends to be, it's not bad and it's not non-existent, but it tends to be a little bit less strong and dynamic. So as a result, because of that, like normally we start these at 3 or 4 steeps in, I'm just going to go from the get-go. So on my left side, I have here some tea that was broken, was sitting in here, and it's been in there for at least 2 to 3 months, to show you guys how infrequently I actually reach for these jars. So it's important for me personally to be able to know kind of how these jars affect it, and if I should even be doing it in the first place. And on my right, it's the stuff that was just broken off from my cake maybe 20 minutes ago. Alright, so I'm going to have a smell. Okay, so it's a little bit faint still, the aroma, and from the cake. So I'd say the aroma is even fainter on that cake, and this is kind of to be expected. Once we start to toss hot water on these guys, we can probably expect a little bit more. So we will just give these both a rinse. Here. And then I will give both of these teas a pair of rinses, but we will be smelling them throughout this process. So it's got sort of a sweet, brown, sugary scent. And I'm sorry, the tea that I'm talking about is the 2013 Xiangming from Yunnan Sourcing. Okay, so the aroma is definitely far more strong, just off of the rinse and tossing those in there for the tinned tea. So that's important to note. And if you think about it, and the reason for my hypothesis is, if you know when you get the sample bags of Pu-erh and you open them up, there's always a really strong aroma, and I think that's, in some sense that is like closer to a sealed storage method, whereas storing it in a tin like this would be a little bit more allow a little bit more from the external environment to seep in. So if you really want that strong aroma, probably the right way to go about it is to toss it in something a little bit more seal. But I think there might be advantages to not doing it. I don't know. I'd be curious to hear your guys' thoughts for sure, because this topic is obviously very interesting. This is a very quick and easy thing to do. So, yeah. And so just to talk a little bit about the profile of this cake, this is a pretty nondescript cake. It's a sweet sort of Iwu tea, or at least supposedly from Iwu. I enjoyed drinking it. It's not the most amazing tea in the world. It's not the most expensive tea in the world either. So my experience of it have been mainly positive, and I've just slowly been chipping away at a cake in the past year or so. Really nice scent, actually. Lots of sweetness, a little bit sort of like a few notes that I would associate with that smaller varietal. So like sort of this hay savoriness. Similar, but it's a little bit weaker. The aroma is definitely a lot more enhanced in the tinned version of it. And you know, maybe that's not important to you, or maybe it is. Alright, so we are going to just go ahead and drink this first steep. And you know, another interesting experiment could be just to do this experiment with different times left in the tin. You could have the same tea that's been in the tin for 6 months versus 4 months versus 2 months versus like a year versus freshly off the cake. It could be another interesting thing to do, because I do know that when you sort of break off the tea into maltchoff form, it does age obviously differently, but we're really not leaning towards the aging here so much as like the very, very recent past of the tea. Alright, so cheers, guys. So it's immediately very sweet. The aroma is really delicious. It's got a really sweet hay sort of thing to it, and it translates pretty directly to the taste. It's got a decent body, some hay notes, hay sort of grain, very simple but very pleasurable sort of tea. Which I'm quite pleasantly surprised by the body here. I'm going a little bit lighter than the ratio I normally use, which is about 5 grams per 70 milliliters. I'm using 3.5 grams, so I expected it to be a little bit thinner than it actually is. So that's definitely a plus, and that probably speaks more to the tea. Alright, so here is the straight off the cake version. Interesting. If anything, I would say the body is slightly more enhanced in this one. And, you know, that could be for a variety of factors. It could have to do just with the individual pieces that I broke off from the cake. It's a lot less dynamic than the other tea. The aromatics are, so sort of like how it feels in the mouth and stuff is more just like straight to the point, I would say. Similar tea, obviously, because it is the same tea. Alright, we will do one more infusion on camera. I'll let that cool for a hot second, and then I will drink. So far, I would say the main differences have mainly been in the aromatics. They do have a slightly different profile from the couple steeps that I've had, but it's a little bit harder to decipher. I don't know what's good about a particular profile over the other. I would say the tin tea tends to be a little bit more dynamic, especially in some of the higher notes, which would make sense if we're just talking strictly about aromatics and stuff like that. The tea on the right, so straight from the cake, tended to be more straightforward, a little bit more full-bodied, which could be just me perceiving it differently. I kind of suspect it is, so that'd be something I'll have to confirm through more tests or something like that. And I'd encourage you guys to do a similar sort of test on your own. I'd be very curious to hear the results. A lot of people talk about tinning those mature teas or those teas that got a little bit too wet, and I've had great success with that. And those differences can be pretty good and obvious, but not so much on these younger teas. So really curious to hear other people's results as well. I would say, if anything, they are converging closer and closer together in their taste from the limited amount of steeps that I've done on camera. I would say that these two steeps had a very similar profile, and so which would kind of make sense because the aromatics and stuff might come out a little bit quicker in the earlier steeps. In terms of aroma, this is still smells great. A little bit, definitely more higher notes and sweeter notes coming off of this one, whereas the tea on the right tends to be a little bit bassier. So, interesting. Very interesting stuff. Anyways, let me know how you guys like this experiment. Thank you guys for watching. Check out that report on TeaDB.org, and let me know what you'd like to see next. Cheers.